Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today we are discussing Final Fantasy again, and not just any Final Fantasy. We are discussing Final Fantasy VII, The Kids Are Alright, a Turks Side Story. A book. We read a book again. And joining me, as always, to discuss all things Final Fantasy and all things books, Chris ZombiePie Redacted. How you doing?
To affirm that I actually did read this book and read it all the way and competently recall the events within, I took the AR quiz for this book and got a whole 4.5 points.
Out of how many points?
Out of 4.5.
Okay, excellent. We are also joined, as always, by one Jeff Rude. How are you doing, Jeff?
Good. Been a lot of books in my life lately. I'm working as a paraeducator, and they are doing state testing in the great state of Washington. So, I have opinions about that Morrissey and Marr, the Severed Alliance tome, and I'm going to be reading a bunch of dark fantasy anthology stuff probably this week. It's going to be great.
How much overlap would you say there is between paraeducation books and Final Fantasy VII, The Kids Are Alright, A Turks Side Story?
Well, considering the amount of training that they give paras by default is 0, not a lot. So,
well, I hope that that extra training helps as we analyze this book. And since we've read a book, we had to call in a ringer, a book expert, my friend Val. How you doing, Val?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you?
Do well. Is this the worst book you've read recently?
I gotta be so honest, this is one of the few books I've read recently. I'm kind of on a hiatus right now, which does not make me the best guestpert. However, I'm gonna call in my legions of past nerd book knowledge to help me along on our path today.
Excellent, excellent. All right, before we get into Final Fantasy VII, The Kids Are Alright, A Turks Side Story, reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That's the email address you can write into. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, which would get you access to our Discord. It lets you put a game into the slush pile for the Off the Deep End shows that ZP is on. If we get up to 40 patrons, we have to play Mass Effect Andromeda, and that's bad. That's a bad thing that we don't want to have happen. But
they made it better, in theory.
Someone claims they did. I don't know. And yeah, we might have an anime podcast coming soon. That might be Patreon exclusive.
How many patrons for a Jason Statham cinematic universe deep dive? For which I will happily also guess
50.
At least 50. At least 50. We just watched Crank.
I would do
again.
our weird one-off idea of doing a kaiju monster podcast series before we do a Jason Statham cinematic universe podcast. But
however,
yes, 50.
Watch-alongs are always available in the Deep Listens Discord. So if someone suggests, hey, we should watch Crank, I bet people would turn up to do that. If I know our audience.
I'm more of a Beekeeper gal. Got to go for the most recent. It is a banger in so many different ways. I think if you are into kaiju stuff, you will appreciate Beekeeper. They are spiritually aligned.
All right, I will need to watch Beekeeper at some point. Now my interest is piqued. So those are all the exciting benefits you could get from joining the Patreon and getting in on the Discord. ZP, I'm told you brought something.
All right, so we have a gift for our viewers because it is a Final Fantasy thing. Now, the last time that Val was on this podcast, I had it within me to not do this because I try not to go hard in the paint when we have guests for the first time, but I simply could not avoid doing this a second time because I saw this at my local Costco and I said to myself, I must review food, this food in particular. All
That's right. ZP's got another food review.
Yep. So this was in the potato chip section, and it was labeled in the section called Potato Chip Alternatives.
Oh, no.
This is from Irvins, spelled Irvins. Now, this is maybe the darkest, most horrifying thing that will ever review on this podcast my entire life. Okay?
Oh, I don't.
This is the darkest thing.
That sounds difficult considering the things you've already reviewed, but okay.
This is Irvin's smoked cheese. It seems, looking at this picture, it is onion, garlic, and smoked Gouda.
Ooh.
Smoked cheese, deep fried fish skin.
Oh.
So it is salmon skins and the skin of fish deep fried to be a potato chip alternative.
This has taken a turn.
With cheese.
With cheese, onion, and garlic.
Yeah. Fish skins. Interesting category of snack. Not my favorite thing.
So it's like a pork rind but fish.
Oh god, yep, that's potent.
How does it smell?
You will notice immediately it is a fish product. Yeah.
Oh boy, there's some big skins here, aren't there?
Yeah, they're.
Holy shit! Why is it so black and tar-like?
I mean, they're dried. Like.
And they're smoked.
And you're also smoking out your home by doing this.
Yeah. For reference, this like cod skins, very pretty easy to find in the form of a dog treat now.
Uh-huh. So I'm eating a dog treat.
I didn't say that.
That's
not what I said.
You're eating a dog treat.
Oh, it smells like dog food too.
I didn't say it.
I forget if you've eaten dog food on this show.
No,
before.
Because you prevented me from
right.
eating
I stopped
Fancy
you.
Feast.
You've threatened to do that after you gave yourself poisoning with Vienna sausages that one time.
It's clearly skin. It's clearly coated in some sort of powder.
Good.
I have to take a picture of this, and I am going to put it in my mouth and eat it.
Put the picture on the Discord so we can see.
Man.
Yeah. I hate to quibble, but if anything, it'd be more like cat food since the fish and all.
That's fair. You're right. You don't deserve dog food.
All right. It smells the part. It definitely is smoked Gouda with like a garlic undercurrent, an onion undercurrent. I can see the texture of the skin, like that weird diamond-like pattern.
You don't get credit for the incomplete assignment.
Quit stalling. Oh, God, it crackles.
Yeah, no, they're pretty crispy.
Yeah, it seems hard to bite into.
Okay.
I'm going to want two reviews here. I want one, how is it just straight up? And two, how is it as an alternative to potato chips?
Or an alternative to Fancy Feast.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not terrible, but it's not good. Oh.
I'm not sick, but I'm not well.
Jeff, you said you've eaten these before?
Yeah, they're not my favorite thing.
How desperate was your situation, Jeff, when you had
Not
to?
at all.
Okay.
Just go live your life, try stuff, have experiences. Yeah, they're
Okay.
Dried fish, stock fish, stuff in that category.
I like the dried. Look, I am part Japanese. I eat the Japanese crackers and the dried squid and fish all the time. This does not taste as good as this. This does not taste as good as this.
Now, how is the fish to cheese flavor profile? Can you which one are you getting more of? And
I'm getting so on the initial when your tongue hits the powder, it is 100% cheese powder.
Okay.
And then once that goes down the throat and or dissipates, it is, let's say, a very fishy salmon. Like when people say they don't like salmon because it's too fishy, this is what they're talking about. I've had some very good salmon where that is not the case. This is very fishy to where it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I love fish. I'm gonna eat another one of these, but I'm gonna eat literally one more.
Can you just lick one and see if it's as bad?
Okay, let me try that.
Oh,
That was
God.
horrible.
Oh, God.
I regret
Okay, that
it.
was better. That was better. But now I've got this like soggy fish skin. I'm gonna just eat it.
Okay, please post the picture you took in the food channel so that we know what's going on here.
I still don't like this.
Oh, the licking it didn't help?
No, I mean, here's the problem. Like, you know how when you eat pork rinds and if you leave them in your mouth too long, they start to become like back to the stomach lining gelatinous stuff?
Mm-hmm.
When that happens with this fish skin, it is the worst. It's not good. Oh boy. I didn't enjoy that. I did not enjoy that. I did not hate that. I don't think that was the worst thing that I've ever eaten. It's dark. The idea that someone would want this as an alternative to a potato chip is dark. I'm going to give that a 2 out of 5 to palate cleanse this ever so slightly. So since we are talking about Final Fantasy VII, I saw that some of you saw what I posted in the assorted memery column, but just as a friendly reminder, we're heading into the summer months, and I was in the stores recently, and to commemorate, Cloud Strife being, I think, arguably gaming's number 2 twink and or femboy, whether you believe or subscribe to that theory or not. Sometimes
Behind
he's
who?
number 3. Oh, it's Link. Link is the
Okay.
absolute number
that's
twink,
fair.
number 1 twink in video game history. Nike's femboy shorts for 2024, the 2024 edition have come out. They're the shortest that they've ever been. It's incredible. I'll post this into the Skype. But anyways,
Oh yeah, I see those. They are incredible. Agreed.
they've never been this short. Ever.
Shorts, they've never been this short.
So maybe there's something to our good friend Kyrie and her Kyrie and her shorts and like tomboy, every tomboy in Final Fantasy tradition ever, because boy, Nike just saying, hey, inflation, right?
These are clearly a jort, but we'll get into that. Also, just one more quick thing on the salmon nightmare. You neglected to mention how much they resemble rotting flesh.
Yeah.
I gotta
They're
say,
unpleasant to look at.
they are unpleasant to look at. The bag says dangerously addictive on it. The logo, I think it says a lot. The Irvin's logo of what you're getting into. It's just a duck staring at you blindly. Just cold, dead eyes.
Here's what I would say to this category of product.
Uh-huh.
Broadly, I'm not talking about fish skins. I'm talking about substitute goods for things that people have deemed to be quote unquote unhealthy. Just have a potato chip. It's okay. It's really gonna be okay. All right. You don't need that much more protein. It's just eat the good thing. It's okay. All right. Don't stress out about that. And maybe don't spend $20 on a bag of salmon skins. Like,
oh,
you
right.
know?
Yeah, I should mention the price of these. If you look
because
these up,
I
it's about
guarantee you
$20 a bag.
Yeah, some sort of insane price, right? It's a grift, and you're being grifted. It's just have oh my god, there might be a trans fat in it. Yeah, it's fried potato. It's good. Just eat one.
They fried the salmon skin to make it tolerable. It's not like that wasn't fried.
Actually, you know what? Let me look this up.
Don't half-ass your snacks, people. All I'm saying.
8 grams
Whole
of protein,
ass your
but
snacks.
yeah, 17% of your cholesterol and about 20% of your total fat intake with one serving of fish skin. So really, pick your poisons.
And now you've got a Costco quantity of it, so that's great. All right, so without further ado, obviously you're listening to a Final Fantasy podcast. Let's discuss Final Fantasy VII, The Kids Are All Right, a Turks Side Story. Jeff, you picked this book, so why don't you give us a little setup What is this book?
Sure. So this is yet another unsung entry in the God, what were they calling it?
Compilation of Final Fantasy.
Thank you. The compilation of Final Fantasy. This is one chunk of that because when this series of media things get ported over to the United States, they went with something kind of cute and went with the abbreviations wound up being AC, BC, CC, and DC for each one of these things. You had Advent Children, you had Before Crisis, which is a phone game that did not come out here. You had CC, which was Crisis Core, thank you. DC for Dirge of Cerberus. Ever Crisis, which is something we may talk about, in like 15 years or so. It's like, I guess, a really distant echo to tickle the nostalgia centers of old people like me, and I guess Gino and ZP, to remind us, like, hey, remember like late high school when there was some like mild optimism around any of this sort of media flogging business. This came out at that time, along with the other light novelish thing, and we'll work on that definition in a little bit here, On the Way to a Smile, which, as you'll recall, was a sort of short anthology of 6 short stories involving 5 people that had already been introduced in the canonical text of Final Fantasy VII, and a 6th character whose name was Denzel, who was I'm going to say a minor character in the film. It was okay. This is kind of doing something else entirely. Rather than be a anthology, this is basically a light novel. Let's call it a novella if we really want to, again, stretch some definitions here, around some sort of new OC feeling characters that have been forcibly slammed into the bottom receiver slot of the Final Fantasy VII universe. Very forcibly. We start doing some things with the canon of Final Fantasy stuff pretty early on in this book that feel pretty weird, and I don't know how much this would have enhanced watching the film. I don't know how much this book would necessarily have enhanced playing at least Final Fantasy Rebirth. I've not played Remake, so I don't have a lot of or I guess Remake. Remake's the first one, right? Rebirth is the one that just came out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So Remake. Remake features a character that's introduced here all the way back in 2007? But not the main one. But yeah, we have the tale of a lad named Evan who is existing right in that sweet gap between the cool 5-minute cutscene at the end of Final Fantasy VII and the opening chords of that movie that had Cloud with the cell phone. If that sounds like an interesting fictional crease, like something you're just just stoked to learn more about, this fills in some gaps. And I don't think it's a total embarrassment.
No,
but I'm not going to sit here and say it's like worth like hunting down exhaustively.
So we'll go over this as we discuss this book. But the first 2/3, I would say, of the book centers around Evan Townsend, who is, he's right in the sweet spot. He's like 18. He's not a boy, not yet a man in that zone, and his gang of moppets who are running around trying to make their lives work in the aftermath of the events of Final Fantasy VII. There's a bunch of original characters, as Jeff alluded to. There's Evan, there's Kyrie, there's Leslie. If you've played Remake, you've seen some of these characters and went, it's weird that this character has such a big speaking part. I've never heard of him before. And it's because he was in this book. And the person who wrote Remake also wrote this book. And so the OCs got copied over.
I think that's something that we didn't really talk about before, but we did talk about it ever so slightly, is Kazuki Nojima, who is the author of this book and then also one of the lead writers for Remake, Rebirth, and a lot of other Final Fantasy games. He was also the scenario writer for 10, 8, and Apparently, like a very accomplished like lyricist. He's been writing the songs for some of the major Final Fantasy songs. He did Liberali Fatali for 8, and then
Oh, wow.
also
Huh.
Suteki Dane for 10,
Steki
Yeah.
Dane?
and then
Wow.
did remakes Hollow. And if you've been playing Rebirth, he wrote the lyrics for No Promises to Keep. On the Way to a Smile had been a long, older project. Like, it dates back all the way to 2005. So shortly thereafter, a year and change after like 10-2. And it's not something that like it's something that even predates Advent Children in a lot of ways. Like episode Denzel, as we kind of reviewed when we last met about a book, was like a blog post on their website, and it remained untranslated for years. And, you know, it was the on-ramp to this new compilation program. This book did not get officially translated in English until 2019. The first On the Way to a Smile came out in 2009, had been translated in 2018. And one of the other books that came out that was like a compilation of Final Fantasy work, which is Hoshio O Megaru Otome, The Maiden Who Travels the Planet, still remains untranslated. So these works have been frames of reference for the remake and Rebirth continuity. They're much older than I think we sometimes give credit for, and also some of them still remain untranslated. And even then, when they translated them, it wasn't until like the on-ramp until the new reboot games.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, that this book, I mean, it's situated in an interesting time period when it was written, and also it is trying to flesh out a time period that you may or may not be interested in. And it features a bunch of characters who you definitely do not know, who occasionally bump into characters you do know. So it's an odd project in a lot of ways. I kind of respect the first 2/3 of this book a lot, because they are trying to take the Final Fantasy VII setting and tell a compelling story within it that is not relying on the same people. Like, you know, when we were reading the previous book, On the Way to a Smile, all of those stories are told from the perspectives of characters who you already have investment in, unless you're Val, in which case you're like, I don't know, this guy's like a vampire, I guess.
Correct.
So this book is, for us, just as disorienting as you, Val, because a lot of these characters, they don't exist in the games until Remake, which came out like now 5 or so years ago. And then their storylines don't, like, they interact with some characters like Reno and Rude, the Turks, like some of those characters are from Final Fantasy VII, but the main thrust of this book is the story of Evan kind of coming of age and his maybe girlfriend Kyrie, and him trying to figure out where his mom is at, because she left right before the meteor fell at the end of Final Fantasy VII, and she moved away, and so he doesn't know where she is, because he was supposed to follow her, but because of the disruption of the cataclysmic events of 7, he doesn't know where his family is anymore. And it's kind of a long path to him figuring out where his mom went.
I also have to say, just related to that part of the first book was the best part. The part where we were going through the motions with these recontextualized Final Fantasy VII video game characters was the worst part of the previous book.
Yeah.
And I would say that very much applies here, because when we just have Evan and Leslie and our troupe of like con artists and thieves just kind of like working with Evan, that part of the story is downright good, because you're just having these characters inhabiting these environments that we are familiar with, but playing by their own rules, and they're not walking murder machines. They're not even magically aligned characters, so they can't do some of the more ridiculous things that we've seen in the game. They have to kind of work within their own lane to get even 1 inch of progress with their adventure. That's great. And unfortunately, at some point, this book remembers that it needs to pay reference and homage to Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. Unfortunately, at some point they go, "Oh man, we haven't talked about Cloud in a while. What if we talked about? Oh, there's this book that this is a tie-in to. We should probably drop some stuff." So why don't we start off? Like we've done some setup. Val, did you have any questions about the lore or the setting here that you felt were not covered by the book that you want us to help orient you?
Several. So just to start off, I could use a refresher on exactly what the events of Final Fantasy VII are and where this sits among them.
Okay, I'll do my best to give a quick answer to that. Final Fantasy VII stars Cloud, the guy who's on the motorcycle in this book, for like 2 minutes. Him and a bunch of other characters, Tifa, the lady who runs the bar, Barrett, who's a guy with a machine gun from an arm from the last one, Vampire Boy. There's a guy named Sid who makes a rocket ship. The dog man, Red 13, and then Aerith, like that group, and Yuffie the ninja. Those people, they all go to fight Sephiroth, he starts out as a hero, but he's genetically engineered and finds out that his genes come from this alien creature called Genova that crashed onto their planet centuries before the events of the game. And those cells that are in him drive him basically insane. And then he tries to kill everyone because he believes his mother is a higher life form. And so it's his birthright to destroy the planet. And so he tries to destroy the planet with a big meteor. He summons it with magic. And then at the end of Final Fantasy VII, the life stream that runs through the planet, that's kind of like all the souls of everyone that ever lived, erupts out and destroys the meteor before it destroys the planet. And then the game ends. And there's an implication that, yes, the world was saved, but man, a lot of damage was done to it. Like that meteor almost hit, like the life stream blew out of a bunch of spots in the planet, a bunch of people were killed. So this is kind of happening in the aftermath of that.
Got it. Okay. Very helpful. Another thing I could use a lore dump on is what the Turks are.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to explain who the Turks
Oh
are?
boy.
Sure. So this, evil corporation called Shinra that is extracting Mako energy from, which is, life stream, and it's obviously kind of a oil energy extraction resource allegory thing. They do a lot. They're not just an evil energy company. They're also like an evil, pick your poison company. And one of the side hustles stroke ways that they keep things kind of going is they have kind of a secret police, whose nickname is the Turks. I forget it's some sort of operation division or something like that.
Yeah, they work for, I think, housing and urban development.
Yeah. They're a nested sort of Pinkerton-esque, group within Shinra that goes and does soup to nuts, anything you want, wet work, kidnapping people, paying people to forget things happened, making problems go away. So yeah, that's sort of the setup. And in the text of Final Fantasy VII, by which I mean the game, they are depicted as, depending on the scene, and kind of the people within the Turks, just hard-nosed, ruthless, wet work kind of people, or clowns, just total, stepping on rakes, dropping their glasses, and every time they try to pick them up, they kick them, and they go, "Oh,
Yeah.
shucks."
Their
Sort of
characterization
evil
has been incredibly inconsistent. So that part of the light novels being inconsistent and or confusing is on brand.
Yeah, where they kind of land is there's a almost frenemy-esque energy between the members of Turks and the members of the protagonist forces in the game that gets kind of underscored in the film Advent Children itself when they get around to making that. But yeah, they wind up being sort of B and upper C tier characters that people point back to in Final Fantasy VII and go. And Square's well aware of this. They like to drag out like, "Hey, remember Reno? He's the red-haired guy," and everyone goes like, "Oh yeah, he was cool." So
And
Yeah.
to Square's defense, the reverence that they pay to these characters is not like them forcing these characters down people's throats for reasons that even though I disagree with, but these are very popular characters. The Turks are among some of the most popular characters out of the protagonists. Like, people will cosplay as them. They are well-liked characters.
Yeah, they're not super well written, but they are, in that sort of Star Wars way. Like they have like the one or two sort of characteristics that pop that make them good characters.
The Turks are in the same category as like Boba Fett in the original Star Wars movies. Like, Boba Fett is in 2 movies, one of which he dies with very little like pomp and circumstance. He just gets eaten by a pit.
In the other one, he's basically like, "Oh, please don't kill my bounty." Like, and then he's in that cool cartoon that everyone remembers. What was that called? I think it was Christmas. Anyway,
Star Wars Christmas special.
But yeah, Boba Fett's like an incredible comp because I think they did, at least in Return of the Jedi, try to make him out to be kind of a loser as well. The one time he could have done anything cool, like his rocket thing sort of screws up and then he gets eaten by a hole in the ground and goes, "Ah!" Like, yeah. So perfect energy.
Definitely. Yeah. And they, like, depending on, each of the Turks has their own little personality quirk. Like, Rude is quiet and bald and wears sunglasses and is taciturn. Reno's kind of a jokester and seems like there's a world where he would be a protagonist, but he's in the Turks, so he's got to do what he's got to do. Elena is like young, and she's a young woman who's new to the Turks, and she seems to really like violence. And she has a crush on Sung, who is the leader of the Turks, and Sung is just the most just wet work. Like, he is a company man. He is here to make the company work and do whatever the company wants him to do.
Sung also, this has been kind of like a point of controversy, is Sung in the original translation of 7 apparently died. That apparently was a mistranslation. He wasn't supposed to be implied to have died in the Temple of the Ancients, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And they have since corrected that part. So he's alive, even though this was a point of consternation when the compilation first came out. People were thinking that guy should not be pursuing a relationship with Elena. But I think the weirdest part of the Turks that has never been addressed is why they have this loyalty to Shinra, considering that Shinra did what it did.
And they know everything that Shinra did.
And then also you think back to where Final Fantasy VII ends. Like, the Turks just give up and realize, oh, wait, we're on the wrong side of this war. Okay, Cloud, go ahead and just kill Hojo and Scarlet. Go. We give up. We retire. And yet they go back to Rufus, who the last that we saw him, he was getting his ass blown up, and he was also a noted piece of crap. Whatever.
Yeah, it is a little odd. Val, did you have any other lore setup questions?
No, let's get into it.
Okay. So when we start, Evan is kind of setting the stage for his detective agency. Val, how would you describe his detective agency's setup?
It is, well, a couple things. We're going to have to talk about the cover of this book. But it is very teen film noir. Everything, like, you think that he's going to be talking about, like, finding something for this dame at any moment, while also
this dame came into me on a moody, swampy night, and she was asking me about where is her loved one that's been gone for at least 2 weeks. He was supposed to get money from the biggest name in the mafia. Now it's my job to find him and figure out what happened.
But also extremely, and no one understands me because I'm so different. I'm a teen.
It's amazing.
I'm blonde with blue eyes and conventionally handsome. No one gets it. Yeah, and then
my felt hat is a distinct part of my personality.
Yeah, his bucket hat is a real
his bucket hat, his
Studded leather jacket.
studded leather jacket, his armor, his shoulder bag, the messenger bag. Is he wearing a cravat also?
No, he has some kind of silly armor-ish thing that's described, I think, right? Right?
I think so.
Maybe I made that up. He probably
He's got an ascot.
Dare I say, there's a little whiff of Nomura here in his his assembly. Because there's a scene where he very explicitly describes his entire getup that he's putting on to go out into the world, and it's A, Nomura, B, as you said, Val, exactly what like a teenager would describe this as, this like donning of his, spiritual armor to go out into the world, with his felt hat and his, I swear to God, there's a shoulder bag.
There is a shoulder bag.
Yeah.
I also would like to, if I may, draw our attention to the art that is about 3 pages into this book.
Yeah.
So there is a midriff-bearing vest happening.
Yep.
That's also part of the fit. We're doing a mid-calf boot, which I think works. And yeah, the cravat / ascot thing is still very much a thing with the studded leather jacket. I think that his is probably the least forgivable of the fits that we are shown in all of the art in this book in particular. And all of the fits are a giant downgrade from the last book that we read.
That's fair. And Evan's on hard times. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's living in the slums. He's solving mysteries with his gang. And their whole thing is that Kyrie, his not girlfriend,
his not girlfriend. They're not official. They're not doing labels.
Yeah, they maybe they hold hands, but it's by accident because they're scared, But yeah, the way that they try to sell their detective agency is Kyrie's a con artist. And she says that she has unique powers to speak to the life stream so that it's going to tell her through magic where the thing you lost or person you lost is. And then they just do normal detective stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the setup. And we get kind of Evan's rundown of here's what happened to me before the events of FF7. Here's what happened once my house ran out of power after the events of FF7, and I had to go into the slums so that I didn't starve to death. Does anyone remember how Kyrie and Evan meet the first time?
Yes, because they do that as a flashback.
Yeah.
So they do that in like the middle of the book. They explain it. So he was in his house waiting for his mom to come home and was drinking toilet tank water. And he came out of his house to like run an errand. Like he wasn't quite ready to go down to the slums yet. And then he saw her just like sitting on the curb having skinned her knee. And she was like, "Is that the last of your water?" And he was like, "Yeah." Loki did not mention it was from the toilet. Helped her clean her wound because she had skinned her knee, which
with toilet water.
Yes. And then he gives her a piggyback ride the entire way down to the slums. She steals his bag and then comes and finds him a couple days later and brings him to her grandmother's house. And then he lives there, I suppose, for a while. And that's how the gang gets together.
Yeah, and I think that's a great, that flashback does a great job of setting up that Evan, and his internal monologue does it a lot too. He is in his own head. He is trying to be cool, but he is the type of person who would put on a bucket hat and a jacket with a lot of studs and go, "Yeah, I'm cool. I'm a cool guy." And the book seems to treat him that way. It treats him like someone who is trying desperately to be cool and seem like they have their stuff together.
I'm going to actually come to the book's defense. Okay, this thing was marketed for teens to young adults, Gino. And I think that that's incredibly important to recognize. And you can bemoan the edginess and that type of thing as much as you want. But this was properly marketed for teenagers.
Oh, I'm saying that the book, his internal monologue, when he's trying to be tough, when he's trying to act like he's streetwise and he knows what he's doing, the book often in narration or in reactions from other characters, they basically impress upon you that Evan he's basically a spoiled rich kid. Until
he's essentially a cipher for the people who are most likely reading this thing at the end of the day. Like, that's kind of I'm not going to call him a genius protagonist, but in terms of like making an effective cipher for the people who are probably buying a copy of this and going into Advent Children, maybe a little excited and or anticipating the best out of it, he's a pretty good reflection of those people who are getting ready to see Advent Children and like excited about Advent Children.
Like, as a teen, I would have been extremely into this whole vibe. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to see it from that lens. However, there are some things that need to be pointed out, including the heavy-handed allegory about the stray cat that we start out with on the first.
Sure. I mean, like, but even before that allegory, like, what was the most awkward thing about the previous book that we read? It was the flashbacks and flash forwards. What is the most awkward part of this book? The oftentimes clunky juxtapositions between the past, future, and present. Because after you get the kind of early introduction of like, okay, he's got this investigative service, he's got a job and is living on his own in Meteorfall. Flashback 2 years ago, Fabio. Stealing some geostigma medication. You should already know what geostigma is. You should already know the importance of having this medication. Fabio's trying to rob Rufus. Most of the people that he was working with get caught, but not him. Now Elena's responsible for finding Fabio. Smash cut back to the present. Like, those juxtapositions are really abrupt sometimes, and I'm kind of shocked that there's still a problem in this thing, because I feel like they were a problem in the previous book.
Yeah, I do think that it takes for granted that you have consumed like 2 to 3 other pieces of media to really know what's going on. Val, did you find it to be even more of a whiplash? Because I don't think you've watched the movie.
No, I have not watched the film. I don't think I necessarily thought it was more of a whiplash. But I think something important that we will get to inevitably is the difference between the structures of the two. So the previous book has all these like little like
It's an anthology. At
Right.
the end of the day, it's an anthology. This is a fairly linear narrative following a story through the vantage point of our protagonist, Evan.
Right. So the anthology gives you a lot of wiggle room to jump around from various points of view, whereas this does less of that. So I guess in a weird kind of opposite way, I was more forgiving of that because it is more difficult to do in a linear story this way.
Yeah, and they have some monologue at the beginning of the book where Evan's like, yeah, I'm narrating, and yeah, there's some stuff I wasn't around for, but so I'm just kind of winging it there, taking some artistic license. So, I might be wrong, my bad. Which I thought was a nice way of hand-waving that. But yeah, I honestly like the setup of Evan as this character who is, all the characters in the original game are generally from either lower class backgrounds or they're not from Midgar. They like come to Midgar later on. Basically everyone in the main cast of FF7 doesn't live they end up in the big city, but they're not from there. And having Evan kind of be a stand-in for an average person who actually lived on the plate, because Midgar, I think we went over this last time, Val. Do you know how that city's set up? The whole concept?
I remember the whole like 2-layer disc thing.
Yeah. The big pizza. So it is trying to set up, what the world would have seemed like to someone who lived the good life in the big city. For the person who lived in Manhattan, like what was it like for them when stuff went sideways? And I think that's a cool thing, like seeing how someone who lived a privileged life but still was a moody teen and didn't appreciate that he was privileged, and then the world basically ended, and then he's got to find a way to survive. And now being a moody teen and being one of the only like people of privilege left around, and having to blend in with people who were basically taken advantage of by his class the entire, all the time leading up to Meteor Fall. I think it's a cool setup. And he's just basically putting on a front all the time, trying to not let in that he's vulnerable.
Yeah, I also think an important thing about this teen persona that actually like lends credence to his whole vibe is that when he was up on the plate in the before times, as it were, they definitely lay the groundwork to explain that like he is not the well-off of the wealthy up there. Like he and his mom are like struggling to make ends meet, even though they do have a house and a TV and a phone and things that obviously the people in the slums do not have. So it makes more sense that he has a chip on his shoulder from that and kind of takes that with him.
Yeah, he's middle class. He's like, hey, I live in a okay apartment in the nice part of town, but I don't have a butler.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I kind of feel like his sometimes forced mentality that he must assert his coolness and must assert his like weird sense of style actually works for his characterization for most 2/3 of this thing, is because it feels like he is constantly trying to step up and be above the riffraff, even though he constantly works with the riffraff. They're most of his customers. But he's not permitted full entry into the highest echelons of Midgar society. And we'll find out why.
Yeah.
I thought that part was actually good. I think that, shockingly so, compilation character that is kind of being forced onto us, Evan is a pretty good character for what he does.
Yeah, and I like that, like, a bunch of the characters from the slums that he runs into, him just kind of having a middle-class sense of morals. Like, don't steal. Like, try to help people if you can. Because he didn't have to scrap at any point, right? Like, the rules always worked for him growing up, for the most part. So why should he take, society's rules at anything other than face value? And, like, bringing that sensibility to other people... I think they say that Leslie and Kyrie and some of the other characters, Fabio, they basically they start doing detective agency stuff instead of cons and stealing stuff from people after they meet Evan, because Evan looks at them different. Whereas when they were growing up, that was what they had to do to get by, and the people with them just didn't care. So it's like an interesting tension, though it is a little bit of a like... the middle-class savior comes to teach the riffraff how to behave through his innate goodness, which is potentially problematic. But I thought it was an interesting thing that, like, the people basically keep him around because at the end of the day, he's a kid with a good heart. And that's, ironically, does anyone want to say why it's ironic that he's got a good heart?
Yeah, well...
Yeah. Well,
I think it also helps it be a little bit less icky just because he is very desperate to be seen as cool by them. So he is actively trying to be more edgy and, push the boundaries, but it just like is not inherently who he is. So it makes it less like, oh, I'm going to show you right and wrong. Like he is actively trying not to do that. Yeah,
he is unable to hide when he thinks something is wrong. He's not moralizing at people, but him just like being uncomfortable makes other people uncomfortable, and then they kind of work their way towards, I guess, more reputable sources of income. So what's going on with his heart, Jeff?
Well, the head is the one that comes up at the end of the book, right?
Yes.
So
the head and the heart.
Yeah. The head and the heart. So I've displaced whatever heart issue he may or may not have had with the head issue, which is a plot point. But but it required a certain amount of medical procedure to make good. And there was an issue with payment, which led to mom not being around a lot after a certain point, because she was busy.
Yep.
And this, winds up becoming a major plot point when mom basically disappears with a fella named Nick Foley.
I have to imagine this is a wrestling reference, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know how else you come up with that name. A reference to Mick Foley. I guess if you're from New York, you may know who that is. Or a wrestling fan from North America, or maybe Japan.
Or if you played the Nintendo 64 WWE
Oh, hell yeah.
wrestling game.
There you go. Yeah.
It's
there you
in
go.
there.
And also just general, really cool, nice, genuinely good man.
Yeah, a nice person. But yeah, a gentleman shows up one day, introduces himself as Nick Foley, and he and mom both make motions of like, well, things are gonna change around here, which our lad Evan interprets as a really great opportunity to become a stroppy teen and run out the door. And by the time that cools off, he gets home and everyone's gone. This is sort of the catalyst for a lot of the rest of the insanity. It turns out the root cause of why mom was leaving was ultimately money around surgeries for this child, though, as I recall. Have I got this right?
Yeah. So he had heart surgery when he was young, and then his mom was like working to pay off debts, and she was told that. We find out later that she was told he needed another surgery, and so she was saving up money to get that second surgery, because he was supposed to have a brain tumor, and we'll go over more of that later. But yeah. So he was kind of a latchkey kid because his mom was always working to save his life, and then you get introduced to Nick Foley, who's like, "Hey, Evan, this is your new dad," but not in so many words. Speaking of his dad,
right. Before we get to that,
I was going to say what is the first thing that they say happened to his dad? Not the twist.
Okay. He stepped on a landmine. He died in the war. He stepped on a landmine.
Yeah, he fought in the Wu Tai War.
Yeah, so that is what he thinks happened to his dad. ZP, you wanted to go someplace else?
So we start to meet a cavalcade of new characters. So you mentioned Nick Foley. We've already talked about Fabio Braun. The names for some of our characters are incredible. So Fabio's geostigma infected younger brother, Bits Braun.
He's just a little Bits Braun.
And then
what's wrong with him?
We get a new client for Leslie, and his name is Tyron Ard. And he wants you to find his son, Gould Ard.
Yeah.
And then there was a doctor who's going to help us out, and his name is Dr. Drake. Really unfortunate about what happened to him with his rap beef, but whatever. Some other good characters were not saying. I wrote these down somewhere.
I mean, Kyrie Cannon.
Kyrie's canon. Merle is canon. Doyle, Thorpe, Keogh. Forget what Keogh's last name was, but
I don't
just
think
like
he gets a last name.
Mwah! This is Final Fantasy goodness. I love it, love it. But some quick character introductions, because again, we find out that the reason why Fabio stole that geostigma medication is because he's got a brother that's sick and is dying. And then, Leslie's trying to tell him not to steal, but it's also like, my brother is literally like one step away from dying. What are you even talking about? I was like, yeah, tough titties.
That's fair.
I'm going to pick up a contract to find this guy's kid. All I got is a photograph. Then deep ruminations and noir dialogue.
So that medicine plot line, that was actually in the previous book, if I remember correctly, right? There was some chapter about how they were trying to develop a medicine and they were experimenting on people.
Yeah, that was the last chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
like,
it was like very Turks forward, very Johnny Shinra Rufus
Rufus.
forward, right?
Yeah, I think it was a Rufus chapter. So yeah, like they tell, if you read the previous book along with us, you'll know all about this medicine that they're trying to make, because Shinra's trying to make good. They're trying to develop a medication to help with this mystery disease because they've done so much bad in the world. And this is kind of jumping to the medicine's ready. Fabio tries to steal it. He succeeds at stealing it, but then the Turks come to find Fabio to mess him up for stealing medicine. And really the big problem was they blew up a machine that they needed to make more medicine. And the world does not have new fabrication of anything, really. People are just passing around the same cell phones over and over and over again. So that is where the Turks come to meet Evan. Evan is actively trying to put on glow-in-the-dark paint in his house.
Yeah, I was really excited to talk about this.
Yeah, please go ahead, Val.
Insane. Okay, so he's doing like a little home decor project. So some of the back lore that you get about Evan is that because he was kind of a latchkey kid, he took care of a lot of the housework. He felt guilty and like tried to get a bunch of jobs growing up, and his mom didn't want him to work because she was, I mean, we later learn potentially has like a head trauma, injury, cancer situation. So he does a lot of housework. So we meet him as he's moved into his bachelor pad and is trying to give it a quite literal glow up. He has wallpapered one of the walls, and his next move is to paint the ceiling with glow-in-the-dark paint so that it will absorb the light during the day and then glow at night. And he does not think this through, clearly. Because his whole plan is to have an entirely glow-in-the-dark apartment. It is very 90s, like, imagine that your whole bedroom vibe is velvet glow-in-the-dark posters. That's really what he's going for, which is hilarious and amazing.
Or those stick-on stars that you could go get for like $4. Just cover your entire ceiling in those. There's no gaps.
All the cool kids had.
Yeah.
Yeah, he also makes a point to mention that this is a commodity and that he had to trade for it. Another detail that we failed to mention that's important is that Evan has fat stacks of cash that he does not dip into. So he has like family money that was just kind of hanging out in the ceiling of his home, and this disappears for a long time and does not come back up.
Yes. Yeah, he's got money. His mom had money, and he's like, where'd this money come from, Mom? Oh, sorry, you're too busy being gone for me to ask you. So I guess I've just got a bunch of money, but I'm not going to spend it because I'm frugal. I will, just to give him a little bit of credit, I think the idea with the glow-in-the-dark ceiling is that there's no electricity. And so having a source of light at night is it's worthwhile. However,
not being able to sleep because you're sleeping in a glow-in-the-dark raid den.
Look, Evan doesn't think anything through. Look at him. But yeah, so he starts putting the paint on, and then the Reno and Rude, like the two of the main Turks, basically tell him, hey, they think he's Fabio. So they try to get him to come out. And they warn him that they're going to break his door down if he doesn't come out anytime soon. Evan's like, oh my God. And then they eventually just break his door down and give him a big black eye. He doesn't really fight back that much. And then they leave and he does not out his friend Fabio. He does not let them know that he is not Fabio. And then they just kind of go back because the Turks in this story, they are mainly creating a monument in the center of Edge, which is a city just outside of Midgar. And that monument you may recognize from one scene in Crisis in oh dang it, there's a scene in Dirge of Cerberus that has it, and then in Advent Children, this monument is there. So this book is also doing a little bit of work of explaining what the hell that is.
It's the monument with the final battle with Bahamut, right? Like
Yeah,
that
it's
giant
the monument that
okay.
Bahamut they like fight on. Yeah, so
no, gotta memorialize the people who died. That's a normal thing to do, even though it's built by the people who are the source of why people are dead.
Yeah, that's the weird part. The weird part is that the Turks are like basically directing people to build a monument when their skill set, they're not architects. They're mostly murderers. So it's a bit odd. But after Evan kind of protects his buddies, they all go to Seventh Heaven because that's their gang meetup space. They meet with Tifa for like 2 seconds. And then Leslie and the gang and all of them, they get one job that tells them that, they get a job. They need to find this missing guy, Ard. What was his name, ZP? The missing son?
So it's Tyron Ard is the client, and he wants you to find his son, Gould Ard, and he was a second-class soldier. That's a reference. I think this is actually one of the few times when the references to the characters is actually done well. They go to Seventh Heaven because they want to go to a bar. Tifa is there. She serves them. Makes, small chat. They take their seat. They drink their beverages. They get their client, and then they leave.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect way to have the balance between we have these new characters that we really care about that might lead to something greater. And also, I know that you saw that there's Final Fantasy VII on the title of this thing, so we'll throw you a gimme here. Yeah, but after they pick up that client's thing, his house gets destroyed, and he finds Fabio's been just beaten up. Like there's pretty extensive detail about like he's got a broken nose or something like that. People, whether it's Evan, Fabio, even Leslie. People get the crap beat out of them in this book. Like, I think that Evan in particular spends like 2 whole scenes just like recovering from getting the crap knocked out of him.
Multiple. I mean, he gets the crap knocked out of him. He gets shot. Gets stabbed, I think. People get hurt.
But also I kind of like the fact that there are consequences to the actions of our protagonists and characters, and they actually have to go through like R&R in order to recover from some of the bigger, more flamboyant action scenes. And it's got a good pace for 2/3 of the story. We haven't gotten to the part where things fall apart
anymore.
But our good female companion tries to enlist the Turks for help.
Yeah, and they go through quite a bit. Like they get some materia because that's
there's that
weird
payment part where Reno and Rude kidnap What's-Her-Bucket, and then Evan has to like break out of like a truck, and then we find out that someone knew Aerith for whatever reason because we got a name. Kyrie knew Aerith, and she figures out how to escape the Turks because Aerith gave her advice on what to do if you get kidnapped by the Turks. Just normal conversations that you have when you're talking to a friend.
Yeah, I think that they do a good job of like Kyrie is from the same slum as Aerith, so she knew her. Tifa has the biggest bar in town because of course she does. She did in the original game before it gets destroyed. So like a bunch of the different characters just kind of slotting in. Like Cloud is he's a courier. He's on a motorcycle delivering mail, basically. He's what is that? Is it Kevin Costner, the postman?
Yes.
He's the postman.
Genuine bad movie, but yes.
But that's basically what he's up to. And this first 2/3 of the book is just like, hey, these characters were in the game, but they're living normal lives now. And these other people who are also living normal lives interact with them sometimes. And Sephiroth's not here. Nothing too crazy is happening. Like, Evan and the gang get paid off for finding someone by being given materia as payment, and they don't know what to do with it. They're like, what are these things? Oh, it's materia. Oh, right, materia. This is probably worth a lot of money. But they don't ever cast magic or like doing it. Like Val, when they talked about the little orbs of materia, did that even make sense to you?
I knew that they were probably a component that you needed for magic. Like that, like having been just like around nerd shit, it made sense. But no, they do not they do not explain what it does or how one would use it at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So like spells don't get cast. They don't go into all that stuff. Like Evan tries to use it to defend himself against the Turks at one point, and they just like take it from him because he doesn't know what he's doing. And they end up giving
like he uses it as like a throwing stone or something, like a baseball. He's gonna like try to bludgeon them with it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, they take one orb from him that's dangerous, and then they give him back another one because it's not like he can't hurt himself with it, even if he tried, which is kind of cool.
But more importantly, after the Turks kidnap our characters and whisk them off to this lodge, we get what I could only describe as the first big whopper of a plot twist.
Yeah.
So Rufus and Sang are able to identify our good protag Coon. And they hear the name Annette, and they say, oh, we know who Annette is. Yeah, your mom was the mistress of President Shinra, and you're probably one of his illegitimate sons.
She was a secretary for President Shinra.
So where do you think that money came from?
Yeah, so they basically reveal that President Shinra had a type, and he often made that type of person his main secretary, and they often had severances that were disproportionately large shortly after they had a child. And so, yeah, and Rufus and Evan sure do look alike. So, yeah, they're half-brothers, and Reno's like, hey, it's your half-brother. It's a family reunion. Come on. I love Reno's reaction to Rufus and Evan not immediately like trying to be all lovey-dovey about the fact that they're technically family. He's so incensed that bringing these two together, he's not getting more credit for it, and they're not trying to do more. That's one of my favorite parts of the book, probably for Reno, at least.
I mean, one of the best parts of the previous book was finding out that Reno, how he survived a giant blast from a giant dragon, and his father knowing that he would take this coward escape route and taunted his own son. So let's just say that the relationship between those two was fraught.
You mean Rufus, right?
Rufus, yes.
Yeah.
Fraught. Very fraught.
Yeah, so they find out that Evan and Rufus are half-brothers. Fabio shows up to try and save Evan because he doesn't realize that he went with the Turks semi-willingly, which leads to like a firefight, and they do some, like Fabio and his gang do some terrorist shit. They blow up some stuff, and Rufus basically tells Evan, hey, take my gun, hold me at gunpoint. The Turks won't hurt you as long as they think that I'm being held at gunpoint, and then you escape with your girlfriend. And take my gun, take some ammo. Like, you'll need it, basically. And yeah, then they run away.
Evan gets kind of messed up. There's a quick scene with Dr. Drake. Also, like a weird interstitial with what was that guy's name? Doyle, and the thieves that work with Doyle.
Yeah, Doyle Town, which is where Evan lives.
Yeah, one of the I don't know if it's here, if it's slightly before, we get introduced to one of the major secondary characters of this book, which is a fucked up old car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's around this time.
Like there's almost we are perilously close to like guy jerking off to car level descriptions of the just the various stages of this car's life throughout this book. It's fun. When they put this character into Chocobo Racing, Evan will be driving this car, and it will be perfect. They should do that.
Oh, yes. So this car is how Fabio shows up to try to rescue everybody. So they roll in this hot whip, and we get some descriptions of said hot whip, and that is, I think, the point where there's within the firefight, the windshield gets shot out, and that's a very important thing to note for later. Because they end up rolling around in this whip with no windshield and goggles.
Yeah, in a better world, that car would have been branded. Would have been like, man, I love my Ford Focus.
Yeah,
Evan
a Ford Taurus, if we're thinking about the era in which this was written. But yeah. There's a moment when they realize that they need fuel for the car. And so who does Evan call?
Well, who does Cloud call on his behalf, right?
Well, he calls Cloud first.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, that's the chain of events here. Who do you think would be able to provide fuel? Who have we not really met recently?
Well, Denzel picks up the phone. So we hear from Denzel.
Wait, no.
There's no Kate Sith in this, is there not?
There isn't. Kate Sith isn't in it, no. I don't think they even name drop him.
No, they don't. I took special notice of all the name drops.
They do the urban plant. Did we allude to Reeve to Esty at any point?
Maybe the WRO, but I don't think they allude to Reeve specifically.
Yeah, so they do talk about
Reeve
the WRO.
was such a huge focal point of the first story, especially with our young boy from the first book. So I don't think it's completely uncalled for him to be absent here.
Yeah. But yeah, they call Denzel, and then Evan calls back and he talks to Meryl, and then
can we talk about that?
Yeah,
like
sure.
After the events of Avid Children, Denzel develops this relationship with goddamn Cloud and all of our beloved Final Fantasy friends. And what does Cloud have him do? He makes Denzel his secretary, so as that if you want to hire Cloud, you got to go through Denzel first.
Your sequence of events is backwards. This is pre-Advent Children. So Denzel is still, he's sick. He doesn't feel so good. And so he's got to stay at home answering the phones so Cloud can ride around on his cool motorcycle delivering the mail.
Good. It's so good. A terminally ill child is his secretary.
Yeah.
This series really loves a precocious child in general. Like, Bits is also portrayed as being ill, sickly, and just Wally, mister.
From the jump, Marlene was a precocious child too. Like that was half hour into that first game, probably.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And
No, I just like, Cloud shows up. He's like, "You got mail?" And Evan's like, "Actually, I've wanted to know where you get gas from." And he's like, "Oh, you can get it from the WRO or the Turks." And he's like, "Well, I can't go to the Turks or the WRO." Okay, then just call this guy, Don Corneo. He'll help. Tell him I sent you, and then he might help you out.
The idea that Don Corneo is alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I was under the impression that when you went to the Dragon Caves, and Don Corneo makes reference to wanting to have relations with a minor, that we killed him. I thought he was dead.
So Tifa says something about that later. She's like, "What? He's alive?" So I think that is maybe a thing.
Yeah, they are trying to. I mean, it's implied that he's like real messed up, right? Like he's in a wheelchair or something. He did not go unscathed. So Val, you did not see this because this is in FF7, but this guy's a perv. In case you did, I think that was probably obvious.
Yeah, the whole wall full of pictures of women and children kind of cued me in on that.
Yeah, so that's his thing, and he's played for laughs in the original game. Like, look at this schlubby perv. You beat him up at the beginning of the game, and that's how the Cloud Tifa Aerith picture comes up. And then you can run into him later on in the game, and he kidnaps Elena from the Turks and Yuffie from the main party, the ninja who's like fucking 16 in the original game. And then he basically ties them up to fake Japanese Mount Rushmore, and then tries to decide which of them is going to be his lady of the evening. And so the Turks and the main cast have to team up to save their respective ladies who get kidnapped.
That is insane.
It is insane. And then they, I think, knock him off the mountain at the end.
I want to mention something about this interaction, and that it's my favorite chapter name of the whole book, which is Meeting with a Complete Scumbag.
Yeah, it's a good one. So Evan, he steals some picture. He takes a picture of Leslie's girlfriend or wife? Girlfriend, I think.
Girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leslie's having a kid with his girlfriend, and Evan finds the picture of Leslie's girlfriend on the wall, which is a bad sign. He also sees the picture of Tifa on the wall, and so he steals those pictures because he doesn't want this scumbag to have these pictures anymore, these blackmail pictures. And then after he leaves, Corneo says, "Hey, take whatever pictures you want. I've got copies of all of them. And if you ever try to screw with me again, I'll fucking kill you." So Evan basically takes all of his mother's money and uses it to pay off Don Corneo to get gas for his car. So he can go to Under Junon to try and find his mom, because all signs point to Nibelheim from FF7 as a place he needs to go. And Under Junon's his way. He's going to get there. So next day, instead of...
there's also a very weird interjection, like a skip to Doyle, Thorpe, and Kyo, where they're building the meteor monument because they feel bad about some of the stuff they did. And then there are also Turks there building the monument because they feel bad. It's a metaphor. It's like poetry. It rhymes. And then part 2. And we've been hitting at it, everybody. Part 2 starts well, and then there's a specific point where everything falls apart. Okay,
yeah.
Part 2.
I like that Leslie gets revenge on Don Corneo and burns his house down, and steals a bunch of guns and gasoline for Evan. That's a nice end to Leslie's arc. And yeah, now it's Kyrie and Evan riding off. I don't think we've said, but they're having some on again, off again stuff. Like Evan pushes her away when he goes to the doctor because he doesn't want to get Kyrie and put her in danger. But then she's like, "You should. I want to be near you. We should be in danger together because I like you."
Look,
it's real PG-13 stuff. Val, did you buy their relationship? How did you feel about their whole thing?
No, I thought it was legit because very teen energy is both of you liking each other and neither of you being aware of it, or just in the most obvious way possible. Everybody seeing signals, and it's a running joke throughout the book that everybody else calls her his girlfriend and vice versa. And he's like, "She's not my girlfriend, but I like her."
I can take this card out now and feel good about it, but ZP, as someone else who also works in a middle school, is this an accurate depiction of teenage relationships or not?
Yes, absolutely. It's abso-freaking-lutely.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
this is something that happens.
It's really cracked me up.
Yeah, it's very authentic. I liked it. I was here for it.
And let's not forget, even though those later seasons are really bad, the X-Files made belligerent sexual tension between two characters of the opposite sex very popular.
Yeah, for sure. And as soon as they leave Edge, we get a little bit of rom-com or road trip stuff going on. You know, Kyrie and Evan, they have guns, they don't know how to use them, they have to camp out. Kyrie doesn't know how to drive. Evan tries to teach her, but then he's like, she'll figure it out. She leaves her stuff everywhere. There's a mess in the back of the car because she's not neat, but Evan's neat. They go swimming at one point, and don't look at me when I'm changing, Evan. And he's like, I don't have a bathing suit. There's a lot of little back and forths like that I thought was pretty cute. I kind of wish that the book kept going on their little road trip for longer.
I have a question about a non-consequential to the plot thing that does happen on the road trip, which is
yes.
The person that they roll up with, that rolls up on the back of the monster, that is just supposed to teach them the life lesson that you shouldn't just point guns at people that you don't know for no reason, which is a good life lesson. Are we supposed to know who that is?
The girl on the chocobo? I don't think so.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was like a well-known person. That was the only person where it was not made clear if they were a known person.
No, I don't think she is. I think she's just a person on a chocobo.
As it happens to anybody.
Yeah, it's just someone riding a big ostrich, a big yellow ostrich. But yeah, they go swimming, and it turns out Kyrie doesn't know how to swim. And all of a sudden, the water, like, she's wading in, like, up to her waist, so it's safe, even though it's not, she's not needing to swim. She's just standing. But then the water starts turning black, and then she gets pulled under. Evan tries to go after her, but he doesn't know how to swim either, really. And then Red 13 shows up and like bounds over the car. And so Evan shoots at his own car and blows up the car, R.I.P. car. Red 13 saves Kyrie, then runs her to under Junon himself. And Evan tries to walk there. In between, Evan gets picked up by the Turks, who find him because they've got a helicopter now. And they both end up in under Junon at this point. Does Evan have an arm wound by now, or does he get the arm wound later?
He gets the arm wound very slightly later.
Later, yeah, because we need to meet another one of the doctors first.
Right. So at this point, did you think anything was afoot when the water turned dark before she got pulled under?
Yes, that's paying reference to Advent Children, like a specific character in particular who would do that all the time to signify that they were coming. And I'm just going to say this, Gino, if you're going to act all upset that character makes an appearance here, get over it. Like, this book was supposed to introduce the characters that were the focal point of Advent Children. Like, that is the big thing about this book.
I mean, I can accept that that's what it was for, and also think it's the worst part of this book.
Yeah.
Like, I get why it's there.
I was just disappointed because I thought it was an oblique reference to the Frank Zappa track "Let's Make the Water Turn Black" off "We're Only in This for the Money." But it
wasn't that. It's
no.
so weird. I was hoping that it was
a bitch.
I was hoping it was a reference to the big snake that hangs out in the water in Final Fantasy VII.
So Kadaj,
yeah.
So we meet Dr. Eugene. He sees the girl and, he starts talking about a silver-haired boy with the same eyes as Sephiroth, but he's not Sephiroth. And it turns out it's Kadaj.
Yeah, Kyrie talks to him and it's like, hey, Kadaj. And I'm like, what? You know Kadaj from Advent Children? And we find out that Kyrie sees a different person when she sees Kadaj, but Sung, when he looks at Kadaj, sees the character from Advent Children. So, Val, a little backstory here. Genova is supposed to, like, the alien is supposed to be a shapeshifter, so it tends to, overthrew society by shapeshifting into the form of people that, loved ones and friends of people, and then use that to basically undermine society. So Kadaj has that power.
There is a bit of a lore dump earlier in chapter 1 when that one doctor reveals, I think it's Dr. Drake. I'm reading a book. what's the book about? Oh, it's about Genova. Let me explain who Genova is for like 3 paragraphs straight.
Yeah. Here's this
Mhm.
photograph for no real reason.
You know? And then we find out that, yeah, the Turks their current mission is to recover all of the remains of Genova, which I've always pointed this out. Doesn't make any sense because the whole point of the first game was that you destroyed all of those Genova parts. Genova should be dead.
But she's not.
But she's not for reasons, I guess.
So yeah, this is this part where where Kadaj gets introduced. At first, he's introduced and he's around. You know he's around, but he's not really interacting too much with the main cast. So I was like, okay, sure, you name drop Kadaj. He will become much more pronounced later on in the book, and it's bad. So from under Junon, they get a lift to Nibelheim. They find the person they were looking for. They also find out that Evan's mom is no longer in Nibelheim. She went to the Icicle Hotel. That's the name of it, right?
Yep. The Icicle Inn, sorry. I have it written down.
Icicle Inn. And so Evan wants to go there next. And I think it's at this point that we find out that Nick Foley he was just a guy who had a crush on Evan's mom.
Yep.
And was like the Shinra assigned person to like coordinate with her to.
Also, Fabio's completely dead. We forgot to mention this. Fabio dies.
Yeah. He does die. He tries to he throws a grenade at Rude when he's working on the helicopter, and then Rude throws the grenade back, and it kills Fabio, and like some of the other side characters. But yeah, at this point we find out that Nick Foley was not doing anything untoward. He just had a crush on Evan's mom and wanted to hit it off with Evan because he wanted to have a chance with Evan's mom. I think this is also the first breakdown we get of how Nibelheim comes to have people in it in FF7.
Yeah.
Like by the events of FF7. Jeff, do you want to explain what happened there?
I mean, to just glibly, it's a normal town. It's near a mountain that has got a bunch of magical Mako energy under it, and there's a big mansion. It looks kind of ridiculous in like the what would you call them? The sort of matte painting backgrounds that they used in the PlayStation 1. This mansion is like the site of a bunch of research into Genova stuff. This is where you find Vincent Valentine. Outside of town, there's a big Mako research center where they've got a big chunk of Genova. Anyway, a bunch of ill stuff has gone on in this town. And it's basically been depopulated kind of as a side effect of all of this ill research.
Yeah,
so
Sephiroth burns it down.
That's what happens, right?
As a preceding event to the events of FF7. And then when you go there in the game, there are people there, and no one claims to remember any of the characters who were born there.
Yeah.
So they're like, what the hell?
I'd forgotten the burning down part. But yeah, so that's just kind of hand waved a little bit because there's kind of other problems going on in the game. But yeah, this is a nice little so here's how we accomplished that piece. It in a sense, it might be the most goodest part of like FF7 sort of backfilling lore that this book does. I like it, I guess. It's in terms of things that they've added.
Yeah, I like that they basically explain that Evan's mom, they basically paid a bunch of people.
Yeah, they made a little Potemkin village, right?
Yeah. They made a Potemkin village. They paid a bunch of people off. They all signed NDAs under penalty of death that said, you've always lived in Nibelheim. You don't know anyone. Nothing bad has ever happened here, and you're going to be here for at least 2 years, which is kind of wild. Good work. Good work making the evil corporation go through the mechanics of how their evil works.
I think the other thing, like this is genuinely, I think the last, other than that, finding out the backstory to Nibelheim, the genuine last kind of like character bit that I liked is when they go to the inn, or in Nibelheim, they finally go through all of these villagers and they find the bearded man who turns out to be Gould. And he just like lays everything out. It's like, yeah, the guy you met is only my stepfather. I have zero desire to reunite with him. He's kind of a dick. I don't want to talk to him. I want to move on with my life. Please just tell him I'm dead. And he gives us a little bit of a tip about Annette's relationship with Nick Foley. It's a very brief and short relationship, not even close to being like actually a full in-depth relationship at that. And you get a letter Annette sent Foley, and this is then read to you. And this is when we find out the truth behind like why Evan's mom went to such great lengths to try and care for him.
Yeah, we find out that he was supposed to have had a brain tumor. And so she moved to Nibelheim to get more money because there was a relocation. They paid people off to go there. So she already got paid off for being the mistress of President Shinra. And she's trying to get another payout from the company to afford his brain surgery. And so this leads everyone to Icicle Inn to try and find her. No one really has... There's someone in Icicle Inn who remembers her, but she says that Annette, like, basically went up to the glacier that's above Icicle Inn because her job was to keep track of the folks in black robes from FF7, and so she kind of went after them, and no one's seen her since. And Val, how does this part of the book fall off a frickin' cliff? How would you describe what happens at the inn?
This is so wild. Okay, so first lore question. So is Kadaj related to Sephiroth?
Basically, he's another person with Genova cells.
No, yeah, he's
they're not related by blood.
Not
they both
related
have
by
Genova
blood.
cells.
Is it ever implied that like Kadaj is a part of Genova that morphs into Kadaj, or was Kadaj a person that then got corrupted by Genova cells?
That's not really explained well. It's very fuzzy. I could see it. The explanation.
It's either one of those two outcomes. Val, is that Kadaj might be a piece of Genova that morphed into a Shinra or a Sephiroth clone, or Kadaj could have been a normal ass person who got corrupted by Genova cells, who then starts to morph Kadaj into thinking he is Sephiroth. One of those two outcomes. We don't know which of those two is the real situation. The real McCoy.
I see. All right. So how everything starts going insane. So we're all having our cool, like, potentially, like, hold up in a cute little ice inn situation when all of the sudden one of the scariest things that can happen in media happens, which is somebody sees a creepy white person face outside of a window beckoning them outside. So this happens to both Evan and Song, who both go outside, and then Evan just goes up into this cave with Kadaj, I think.
I think it's a cabin. It's like an isolated cabin.
Right. And then I don't remember what happens in the cabin, but
Evan got hurt earlier, and like Kadaj healed his arm with Genova cells. Fabio came to Evan in a dream, and then his arm felt better, and Kadaj is like, I healed your arm. Tell me where Genova is. And Evan's like, I don't know, man. Why would I know that? Why would I know anything? Look at my hat. I don't know anything. And then Kadaj is like, fine, I'm going to unheal your arm. And then his arm starts hurting. He stabs him a bunch. A helicopter shows up. There's a giant firefight in Icicle Inn. The town burns down. They shoot rockets at Kadaj. A second helicopter shows up. Kadaj ends up in one helicopter. The other helicopter shoots him down. The Turks, all of the Turks show up with guns. I think Doyle shows up and Leslie, and they work a turret to shoot at Kadaj.
Yep.
It's wild.
But then they have to jump out of the first helicopter because Kadaj bamps up to the first helicopter, and so they all like bail out of the helicopter, and then they shoot the other helicopter down. By the way,
Helicopter crimes.
Evan's arm was hurt because Elena shot him in the shoulder because
right.
he and Kyrie decided to like bug out after the hospital the first time. So he's supposed to be, there's like this whole thing where they're like, you're supposed to be an attraction for a shattered shoulder, which doesn't make any sense. How are you just walking around? How are you fine? And then, we find out.
Turns out, there's an answer.
Yes.
Magic.
There's the weirdest answer. So then within this firefight, everybody falls into a crevasse. Kadaj asks Evan if he wants help. Evan says yes, and the help is you get stabbed through the shoulder with a fucking sword.
Which is a reference.
Wow, Kyrie gets to fall into the crevasse.
Yeah, and they eventually they all end up in the crevasse, and they fall into the life stream because the crevasse was opened when the life stream erupted out. And it turns out after the life stream heals Evan's shoulder, and they get dumped out into another cave. And after getting dumped out into that cave, they find Evan's mom and a bunch of corpses.
Who
also she's a corpse.
Yes. Important to note that she is also a corpse.
So the thing about this area,
She also has a lot of letters that she wrote when, for funsies, right?
The thing about this area that we're describing, which is this giant ice plain, is when it's originally depicted in Final Fantasy. I can't believe I'm being pedantic about this. I can't. It is depicted as, like there's, it's a video game thing. And Val, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but I get the sense you know a little. But imagine, if you will, a screen, right? And it's just a white field.
Whoa,
and if
hold
you
on.
go north, south, east, or west, like up, down, left, or right, you emerge again on like the same screen, right? It's sort of a maze where you need to poke around and eventually find your way out of it. This ice field is, by the game logic, enormous. It's not just like, there's kind of a little icy area. It's like, no, there's basically like, for argument's sake, all of like North and South Dakota and then Saskatchewan that you're like wandering around in for a while. The idea that it's just like, oh yeah, incidentally, here's my ma is very funny to me. Like we're obviously on like red thread of fate logic here, but it's a little too much.
Look, they had to get him to his mom.
They
had to get his mom in.
And I know I'm being pedantic, but it's too much.
I can't believe I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So the live stream it is heavily implied that the live stream is a sentient thing. Like it has some sort of consciousness or some sort of like personality.
Yeah.
It has been implied in previous depictions of the live stream. When you enter the live stream, it teleports you to a place that is for you. Because this is why when Tifa goes into the live stream with a wheelchair-bound Cloud, they go to a very specific part of the live stream that is convenient to the plot. Because the live stream knows these two people need to go to this part of the live stream. So in a lot of ways, I'm actually kind of okay with that because it's just reiterating that the live stream is some sort of weird afterlife thing that knows where to put you.
Yeah, that's fair.
The part here that I don't like is when we're like doing multiple things here, right? The stitching starts to come off because we got the live stream and we have to communicate and like reiterate what the live stream is. Okay, so that's the first little fraying thing because this is weird shit. The live stream has never really been a, let's say, coherent thing that has been a part of Final Fantasy VII that has always been like, digestible.
Yeah,
it starts
some
to get to metaphysics. It's a wizard did it. Like it's a very clear example of a wizard did it. And then you start to get like pieces of Genova's flesh falling to the ground. Okay. I thought that we had already established in the games that when bad shit goes into the live stream, it fights back a little bit or it sends it back up. And that, Sephiroth had to do a lot of hard work to get evil stuff into the live stream. So, okay, first little part, peeling off. It's about to burst. It's about to burst. The dam's about to burst. And then Kadash just very conveniently jumps into the live stream, no issues, and then we have a fight scene. While
Kadash finds them, and then it turns out Evan's mom died holding Genova's arm and a bunch of letters.
Yep.
And is this a reference? So she says the names of some of the characters of some of the corpses, and she says the names are Caitlin Stark, Edmund Stark, Trevor Showen, Ezra Monty, and Ian Meadows. Caitlin and Edmund, those are Game of Thrones references, right?
It's Eddard, not Edmund, but yes.
I know, but
So we're at this point we'd be referencing the actual books themselves too, right? Like the original publishing of this predates the program.
yes.
I'm almost certain.
I didn't pick up if Trevor Showen, Ezra Monty, and Ian Meadows are also references to literature.
Yeah. I mean, you know, would that be the most surprising thing in the world? I guess not. Like those books seem
Probably
like they
not.
were successful prior to HBO getting the occasional dick out on cable, but it's a weird pull, I guess. Like, yeah, that hadn't occurred to me, but all the same, yeah.
So,
Mom's down
like-
there with like magic plot exposition letters to hand wave away like a good chunk of this child's like questions about his history.
So that's one letter, the one with all the names.
Yeah.
This is maybe my favorite paragraph. So she writes a letter, and it starts off with like, you know, I work for the Shinra Power Company. President Shinra is your dad, basically, and you need to get brain surgery from Dr. Dimitri and Junon. But then this is the second to last paragraph. I'm going to read it verbatim. I think I can write a little more. I have one last wish. There are people who gave me help when I really needed it, and if you happen to meet any of them, please thank them for me. One is Mr. Vincent Valentine. When I left Icicle Lodge for Midgar, he got me out of a tight spot. Mr. Sid Highwind and Mr. Barrett Wallace helped me on the way back up here again.
What
Like,
a tease. I wanted to meet the vampire man.
it's amazing. It's just like, Evan, I'm dying. I need you to know that I hung out with the main characters from the game. Tell Vincent Valentine he's cool. Tell Red 13 he's a good boy. Yuffie Kisaragi is a ninja. You need to meet her and say thank you. Like, Vincent, Sid, and Barrett were not in the book up until this point, so they fit them into Evan's mom's dying letter as a way to name drop them. Incredible. No notes. Oh, man. Goodbye, sweetheart. I have to sleep now. I love you, Evan. That's like 4 sentences later for this dying woman.
These name drops also just throughout the book in general, as somebody who has not played the games or consumed most of the lore, they're all very heavy-handed in a way that, like, you know, even if you don't know, hey, this person's important. So it has that vibe of, like, when you're, like, watching a sitcom with your parents as a kid and, like, some famous person would come on and the whole, like, studio audience would clap and you'd be like, who the hell is that? That's exactly what it feels like.
Like the worst version of this is like this is Star Wars Episode 3, right? Like they're just like, well, there's a lot of fighting going on, and then Yoda just like looks at the screen directly and he's like, I wonder what's going on the Wookiee planet. Maybe we should go there. And like fights with a bunch of fucking Wookiees for like 20 minutes. And then at the end of the film, he's just like, make sure you protect this planet. Do a good job, my friend Chewbacca. And it's like, it's so dumb. It's so tacky. Yeah, it has that energy. It super sucks. And it's not even as bad as it's going to get yet.
Yeah.
Like, it gets worse.
And so Kadaj, like, shows up because Genova's arm was with Evan's mom the whole time, I guess. They throw the arm into the live stream, and Kadaj is like, Mother! And then jumps into the live stream and then gets zoinked away till Advent Children happens. Evan gets rescued by the Turks, and then we get some true montage nonsense here. So, like, that Kyrie and Evan relationship that seemed to be burgeoning, forget about it. We're not going to find out anymore about that.
For all of you, have you ever written have any of you ever experienced a more slapdashed final chapter conclusion to a book quite like this? Because this might actually be one of the worst conclusions to an actual book that I have read in my life.
I was pretty astounded.
Okay, so I just want to shout out the one good thing, and then we can talk about the bad stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So the one good thing is that after Evan gets rescued, they go to Dr. Dimitri to get the surgery that he said he needed. And Dr. Dimitri goes, oh, well, funny thing about that. We doctors that work for Shinra would do this thing called double dipping. So, like, we would do a surgery and then tell someone they needed another surgery that they didn't need, so that, you know, they'd come back and pay us again. And so Evan's like, wait, I didn't need that surgery. Which leads to this sentence. My mom had been swindled into slaving for money her whole life and ultimately taking a job that killed her, and the man whose fault it was stood right in front of me. Then it turns out they keep expounding upon the ramifications. My fingernails were digging even deeper into my palms. Dr. Drake had told Fabio, and then Fabio had gone looking for me so he could take me to Under Junon, which was why he died trying to steal a helicopter. So basically all of the bad, or many of the bad turns in Evan's life and friends dying and conflicts have been this one doctor who seems to legitimately be good at doctoring, but is a moral monster like most of the Shinra doctors are. He basically manipulated multiple people in Evan's life into trying to give him another payday. And the true villain of this book, I think, is Dr. Eugene. And then Elena beats the shit out of him. And then we go to the bad part. The bad parts. Does anyone want to have a least favorite of this last 5 pages or 6 pages?
Oh, boy. Well, where do we even start?
I mean, they go back to Edge, and then they talk about the monument, and then they
So
talk
it's basically
about
the epilogue is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
you know,
like
Evan and
children happen.
To be very generous, yeah, it sort of feels like the end of Advent Children, and it's because it basically, in about 2 paragraphs, more or less looks at you, the reader, and says, so I would like you to cast your mind now to the movie that you've probably seen called Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, where there's a big punch up. Just put that here. We're not going to we're going to allude to it and tell you that was a thing that happened. And then just quickly move on to a really tacky wrap up. I was astounded. It was great. And then it just kind of like, okay, so you thought that was bad. Keep rolling with that momentum. And it does.
Yeah, it's a real curtain call of everyone you could possibly care about, like basically doing finger guns straight at you via the book.
Yes, it is very much that. And like at the very end is like Cloud and his friends are, look, we're a family. We're not related, but we're a chosen family. And Evan's like, and me and the C tier characters in this book are also a chosen family. We're just like Cloud and the gang. The end.
It's a lot of like, hey, remember this character? Remember that character? Remember this place? They even go to the Sector 5 slums' church, which, if it's not a mechanism for like giving us a peaceful moment between Ghost, Aerith, and Cloud, then why would you bring this back up?
Well, because it's from Advent Children. They dip what's his name? Denzel in the water, and now they're dipping bits.
Right, they give him a baptism.
They're off-brand. Yeah, they get their off-brand. The Denzel they've got at home, they take him and they put him in the water.
Oh man. Oh, also Evan leaves it on the stinger that I might just go visit my brother one day.
Yeah, as some like All American Rejects kicks on basically, and the credits
Yeah.
start rolling, and he drives away in his windshieldless car. Like,
Yeah.
it's the end of Terminator 1, right? But it's like Young and I'm Hopeless. It's Evan with his little felt hat and his goggles. It's an unbelievably rushed, shitty feeling ending to a book that is not incredible, but I feel like the ending of it is such a air letting out moment that it kind of soured all the rest of the book in a way I am kind of surprised by the more I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they actually effectively told a pretty interesting story about a kid whose life was altered by Shinra and why this, like, it's a cartoon villain company in the game.
Yeah.
A lot. And trying to flesh out the ways that this cartoon villain organization, just through banal actions, made everyone's lives worse. Like, his mom, he doesn't exist if Shinra's president is an lecherous piece of shit. His mom basically is shuttled around from Shinra Project to Shinra Project cleaning up their shit because she'll take any money and they're the only people who have money. His surgery was performed by a Shinra doctor, and then he ends up... We don't even know if that first surgery was necessary either, right? We don't know if he needed heart surgery. We think he did. But the dude who said he did also said he had a brain tumor.
They seemed very happy about... Yeah, there's like some sort of weird... like axe to grind against medical malpractice or something that is being worked out here, I guess. Which is an odd note considering that wasn't really present anywhere else in the book. But whatever. It's just weird.
I just like that they made a lower to the ground. Like, Shinra is bad because they're killing the planet with reactors. They're also bad because they're they're a shitty company. They are bad. They perform bad acts on the people around them all the time for no real reason because they have no oversight. And the people who are in charge hire wetworks goons to take care of things instead of actually trying to run a proper company. And I like that. I like that part. All the reference stuff, though, just does not work. And I think... like, the only times that it works are, like, when Tifa is talking to Evan in the bar. Like, those moments. I did get a little kick out of the reference where they ask about the gold saucer. They asked Tifa about the gold saucer and whether she went on a date there. And she basically plays it off because, she could go on a date with Cloud, depending on how you play the game.
Ah, that's fun.
Yeah, but Cloud could have ended up on a date with someone else depending on how you played the game, so they leave it vague in the book, and I like that. But yeah, a lot of the other references I don't think work.
True scandal. You can go on a date with a boy.
And he's got a gun for an arm.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
It is awesome. And he's basically the wizard of the game. That's the cool part about Barrett. Anyway, but yeah.
I think you can go on a date with Red 13.
I think the next time I play that game,
yeah.
I think I'm gonna just take out a guide and just do it. Just do that dumb stuff.
Go on a date with a dog.
But anyways, so we
That's
did
this
it.
book.
We did it. There's one more to go, which I will just say I'm not going to pick that. No, sir, not going to pick the Aerith book because boy howdy, I would rather read the goddamn book where Titus kicks a blitzball and then blows himself up by kicking the blitzball into a landmine and becomes a ghost. I'd read that book before I read the Aerith book.
Yeah.
Wait, that sounds awesome.
The Final Fantasy extended literature universe has some truly terrible places we could go.
And that's not a joke. That is actually what happens in the Final Fantasy X book. Is our good friend Titus decides to play blitzball in an after war zone, kicks the blitzball, triggers a landmine, and then blows up and dies.
That's amazing.
Makes it to Burma, and it's just a bummer there.
Okay, so let's rank this thing, shall we?
It's
Yeah.
difficult. It's genuinely difficult because I got to about halfway. I got to like through the first part, like the first part of this book, and I was pretty positive. Gonna be honest, pretty positive. And then I kept going, and I didn't like what I was reading, and it kept getting worse. And it kind of falls off. And now that I think about like books and things that I have read,
Oh no.
the only other thing that maybe comes to mind is certainly the Dark Tower 7, the final Dark Tower book, because the epilogue in that is absolute dog shit. But I don't know of many other conclusions and epilogues that have just put such a sour taste in my mouth quite like this. It's a bummer.
Get this list
Come here.
going.
No. So the list, let's pull it up. The current list goes as follows. Final Fantasy VI, number 1, followed by 9, 10, 7, 8, 7 Remake, 5, 12, Trading Card Game, Lightning Returns, Stranger Paradise, Final Fantasy Origins, Final Fantasy 1, 5, Legend of the Crystals, what a movie, 3, Dissidia Opera Omnia, 10-2, 15, 13-2, Advent Children, Spirits Within, Final Fantasy VII On the Way to a Smile, Kingsglaive, Final Fantasy 15, Mobius, Final Fantasy, A King's Tale, Final Fantasy 15, Brotherhood, Final Fantasy 15, Last Order, Final Fantasy 7, First Soldier, Final Fantasy 7, Dad of Light, Final Fantasy 5, Dear Friends, Final Fantasy 2, 11, World of Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Final Fantasy X-2 Last Mission, which we edited down, we moved down, 13, Final Fantasy VI Special Tracks, and at the very bottom now, Final Fantasy Unlimited. I feel like this probably belongs in, like, the Advent Children zone.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think that it is better than the last one?
On the way to a Smile? I think
Yeah.
it is.
I think this one's pretty straightforward, and which kind of sucks. But hey, that means we got a light duty day, because I think this is probably better than the Spirits Within, but it's not better
Yeah, I
than
think
Advent Children, right?
That's my stance, is it probably belongs right between Advent Children and Spirits Within. It is better than On the Way to a Smile. If it didn't end the way it does, I could have put it above Advent Children, but it's not going above 13.
Yeah,
too.
like it had a fighting chance, and then it didn't do a full 60, right? So yeah, that makes sense to me.
ZP, do you have any complaints with that ranking? ZP, you still there?
I'm
ZP's
sorry.
muted.
I have
There
no
you go.
complaints about that placement at all. I am even okay with that. All I would say is this would still be below the line of mediocrity for us. Like I don't know if I would recommend people to go out of their way to consume this. Like, you gotta really like Final Fantasy VII, considering like how uneven it is.
Yeah.
I'll also note, seeing as we're right at the end, and I didn't mention this up front, this was originally published as Final Fantasy VII Lateral Biography Turks. The kids are all right.
How dare you? I'm not writing that.
I'm
all
not
down.
either.
I'm
but
not.
The Lateral Biography is an incredible description for a thing, and they are cowards for not
Yes.
sticking with it.
Val, as someone who does not have any affinity for this outside of the last book, would you recommend someone read this if they don't have any affinity for the Final Fantasy VII lore?
Maybe if they were a teen. I might give this to a teen as like some entertaining like summer like breeze through it content. Probably not otherwise, unless there was like a theme or something of like pick something that starts out as a non-creepy teen Dresden Files and then turns into the most off-the-rails shit imaginable. I'm sure there's lots of
All right.
those. Lots of things
Yeah,
fall
for sure.
into that category. I do have
Maybe read one of those.
one question about this that I had neglected to
Mhm.
ask it. Of all of the many cameos, as people who do consume this content, which one did you find the least ham-fisted / actually enjoy?
I think Tifa in the bar, like trying to give Evan a map. I thought that was pretty good. I also like Don Corneo as like, hey, where are you going to get black market fuel? Oh, that scumbag from the original game. And then they burn his house down.
Okay, I have a question for
I thought those were pretty
ZP.
good.
Which extended fiction character is more laughable? Johnny in Final Fantasy VII extended universe lore, or Johnny in Metal Gear Solid extended universe lore?
I mean, Johnny in Metal Gear Solid is like ass up in that one scene, like just showing his whole hole.
True. Yeah, Johnny's a sad loser who peaked
Like in
in high
4,
school,
but
his
he
whole
doesn't
thing
have
in 4
is that he's shitting his guts out.
Yeah,
for,
that's
like,
just
the
it.
entire scene.
As much of a loser as Johnny is in these books, he at least doesn't have like public GI issues that he's being ridiculed for, which is maybe not cool, but anyway, yeah, I like Johnny in everything he has showed up in, except for maybe actual Final Fantasy VII, where he's pretty slight. I think that they've continued to drag him out on the stage and be like, it's Johnny, he's kind of a sap, and everyone goes, oh yeah, it's him. That's fun.
He's better in Rebirth.
Yes,
I'll say that.
He's actually pretty good in Rebirth.
He is. All right, that ranks that has placed Final Fantasy VII, The Kids Are All Right, A Turks Side Story in our Ranking of Fantasies, our definitive Ranking of Fantasies. Which means now it is time for one. I believe it's ZP. It's your turn to pick. What are we doing next?
Yeah, you know what? So we read a book, and then prior to that, we played a spin-off game. And then prior to that, we watched a movie, I think.
I thought we played 3.
Oh, we did play 3. Holy shit, have I actually been the only person consistently picking mainline entries in the series?
Cheeky of you.
I think you and I think Jeff is definitely the wild card here.
Yeah.
And God
But
bless
guys
you,
get
Jeff.
to shine,
Well, I think that we've reached the point with this series where each of us basically usually picks 2 things. And I have not picked anything for the year of our Lord 2024, because 3 we actually wrapped up early 2020, late 2023. So I'm going to keep with tradition and pick a heavy game, because I want to take credit for picking what might be the last truly great thing that we ever play for this podcast. The last legendarily great thing that we ever play for this podcast. I'm picking Final Fantasy IV.
Well, he's doing it.
And I'm going to put my gauntlet down. I will not be playing the Pixel Remaster, nor will I be playing the Famicom version. I am picking... I will be playing the 3D remake. I like the voice acting. I like the characterization.
Do we all have to play that one?
No, you do not.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's... I've been waiting for this moment. Now, this is not a surprising conversation either, but 4 has a unique problem. Right?
It has an incredibly unique problem.
3 kind of gets into the space, but yeah, so just off the dome, there's the original release of Final Fantasy IV in Japan. There is Final Fantasy II, which is how it was released in America, which is a revision of the game that is notably easier with major plot changes. That is released in Japan as Final Fantasy IV Easy Type. That is adapted further for the Wonder Swan, which is kind of the basis for the GBA version, which has more additional content. Then there is I think the PSP version rolls in stuff they did in the after years, which we're not talking about. But that is its own weird thing. Then there's the DS version, which is also a different game in terms of having different game logic behind it. And then there is the Pixel Remaster, which I think takes as its basis the original Japanese version. So there's really like 4 different versions of this game. And by different, I mean like drastically different, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like
All right, so I guess here's the deal then, Jeff. I'm willing to compromise. If I pick 4, which versions would you disqualify for let's say, the standard discussion of 4?
I mean,
if you want to disqualify the
any
3D
of them.
remake, I'm actually okay with that. I will
No,
entertain that.
No, go with the 3D. Go ahead. 3D remake, I think, is not that different plot wise.
No, it
SNES.
1000% is a completely
pretty
different
different.
story. Yeah. Oh my
Oh, it's
god,
different.
it has cutscenes. It's got Yuri Lowenthal voicing characters.
No. I mean like the actual
Oh
plot
no,
itself,
yeah, it's a
not the
completely different
voicing.
story. It's a completely different
Okay.
story.
They've really made 4 kind of complicated.
It's maybe the most
Okay.
complicated game that has a number to it, and I feel like we'll hash this out. But yeah,
Okay, we'll figure it out. But 4, we're picking 4, and we'll tell you at the beginning of the next podcast which versions we played.
It will be like the parable of the blind men and the elephant from the Buddhist tradition, right? For me, an elephant is something that's going to be long and tube shaped and hollow in the middle. For Gino, it's going to be thin and
Was there-
flat. You know, like a.
was there a
it's just-
PS PlayStation release of 4?
Yeah, and that is
There was, yes.
basically
Origins.
a straight conversion of the SNES version of the game.
But the
Um,
Japanese SNES version of the game.
Yes.
We'll figure
Yeah,
all of this
yeah.
out. So thank you, ZP.
My entire room smells like fish.
Thank you, Jeff.
It's really speaking to the Scandinavian in me.
And thank you, Val.
I'm glad that my room does not smell like fish.
And thank you, dear listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Till next time, peace.
Break it down.